Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest installment of In Conversation With. Today, we are honored to have Gregg Baumbaugh from FlexForm Technologies join us and talk about all things hemp. So welcome, Greg. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Fantastic. Can you start by giving us a little bit of background on you and tell us a little bit about FlexForm and what FlexForm does?
Sure, yeah. I've been with FlexForm for 20 years now. Previous to that, I was a CPA, had worked in public accounting, until my wife told me she didn't want to be by herself anymore. That's why she didn't get married because of that. So I got out of public accounting and got into private business. And I joked about 20 some years ago, I graduated from debits and credits and actually became in general management. So I've been doing that for about 25 years. FlexForm, like I said, I started in 2003, and we manufacture interior automotive components, substrates, which is made out of natural fiber and polypropylene. We blend them together in a non-woven process and make the substrate materials are typically used in door interior, car doors, the interiors, the cover material gets adhered to our product, seat backs, package trays, trunk trim is the typical parts that we're in. We're not much in the headliners. The heat from the headliners makes it a little difficult for polypropylene to work. And we are currently importing almost all of our natural fiber from Southeast Asia. It's primarily jute. And so we are certainly looking forward to the hemp industry in North America to take off and become a product that will meet our requirements. And so we don't have to import it from halfway around the world. So
Yeah.
we're really enthusiastic about the hemp market becoming something, I'm not going to say a commodity, but certainly something that can be made into a product that we're capable of using. We use between 60 and 70,000 pounds of natural fiber a week.
Oh, wow, that's significant. So you currently are using some hemp, just not as much as you would like because of the supply chain, or are you using kind of exclusively jute?
Well, we do use, most of our customers let us decide what material we want to use. And once it gets spec'd in, that's what you use. Now, we have had some customers, particularly European automotive manufacturers, have asked for both flax and hemp, of which we get both of those currently out of Europe. So we do use a little bit of hemp, but not very much. Most of it is jute out of Southeast Asia. I would say we probably don't buy right now more than a couple of containers of hemp a year at this point.
Right. Would you, and so in looking at what your manufacturing needs are, what is the comparison between, like, is there a reason that hemp would be better than jute and flax, or how does it compare to other natural fibers?
Well, it's interesting because each one has its unique characteristics. For instance, flax is known to be good for molding in deep draw areas because it is a thinner material, and I think it stretches a little more, so you don't have as much tearing issues with flax. And then hemp is more of a thicker diameter material, which has better strength characteristics. But and then jute is somewhere in between. Is
Okay.
about what I guess the best way I can explain it.
Okay, that makes sense. And what about canaf? Have you done anything with canaf? I hear, a lot of people kind of make comparisons of hemp and canaf, and I'm just
Well,
not
when we
sure.
say jute, we're talking about canaf, tosa, meshta,
So jute's kind of
all
like a
those.
category of fiber. It's not a specific species, or
Yes, exactly. I mean, we have seen very little difference in the product we bring out of Southeast Asia, whether they call it jute, meshta, tosa, canaf. it is all basically the same material, at least as far as the physical property characteristics of it. Some of them may have different shades to it. Some of them are a little lighter than others, but we tell our customers we cannot control the color of the material. This is a naturally grown product. It's going to, depending on where it's been grown, the weather it's being grown in, the seeds that are being used, all impact the color of the material. So we never specify color, which quite frankly is a reason why it's very rarely you see our material, because most of the OEMs want to be able to color match and want it to be consistent. Well, you're not, when you're using a natural product, you're not going to be, unless you want to bleach it, you're not going to get a consistent color.
That makes sense. So jute in general as a category is like somewhere in between hemp and flax in terms of like tensile strength, is what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah, I would say that's the case. But we are getting, like I said, we are getting a lot of European customers that are looking for both flax and hemp, because that's what they use in Europe. So they want that duplicated in North America.
Right. And so in order to, so basically, if I understand correctly, like once you come up with a specification of a product for a specific customer, you need to be able to ensure a consistent supply chain to be able to produce that product in a consistent way for like, what is it, like 5 years, or like what level of scale do you need to see from the hemp industry before you could reliably make the switch to using more hemp?
Well, yeah, and what's going to end up happening is the best way for it to work is when we have a new program that we're launching, is that we get hemp in. That would be the raw material that we're using when we start our specification, when we start sending samples, when they start doing their trial molding, and that will be the material that gets spec'd in. That's the best way to do it. And so as we get new programs coming in that we can use hemp and the old ones fall off, then that's going to be the best way to get hemp as supplied into a program. And our automotive programs will last anywhere from 3 to 7 years. It just depends. We do some heavy truck, and then also stuff like tractors, farm implements, things like that. The volumes are a lot smaller, but man, once you get sourced in, it's like a 20-year program, because they never change those vehicles to speak of. Unlike automotive, where they're either refreshing it every 3 years or actually doing complete rebuild on the vehicles. For instance, the large SUVs that GM makes, they launched the program I think in 2020, and they just did a refresh, and I think it'll be 2026 when they switch to a whole new more than a refresh, but a new design vehicle. So that program started in 2020, so that's going to be a 6-year program.
Interesting. So so you do use some hemp now in some limited amount of products. Is there a way, would you be able to use domestically grown and processed hemp to replace what you're purchasing overseas in an interim period before new products are launched? Or are you kind of tied in because you need the specific specification that you're getting from overseas, and will need to continue to use that until that particular life cycle of that product is over?
Anytime you want to make a change in raw materials on an automotive program, you're going to have to get your customer approval to do that. But let's just say, for instance, in worst case scenario, you have a typhoon come through and blows out the ports in Southeast Asia and you can't get it anymore. Then you go to your customer and say, hey, we can't get this product, but here's a replacement for it. And then we'll run samples and they'll do testing on it. They don't like to do that in the middle of a program, but there's always scenarios where, or not always, but there's occasionally scenarios where your raw material supplier can no longer provide you the material you're getting. if that's the case, then you can talk to your customer and typically get a variance. And then the other thing, I mean, I can tell you right now, if we were able to get hemp at a significantly lower cost, I can assure you our customers would be more than happy to test that material to determine if it meets their physical property characteristics. So
it
I'm
wouldn't
not
be a
saying
case.
it'll never happen, particularly if there's a cost differential that makes economic sense to make that change, then our customers will definitely look at that.
Oh, okay. But so there's not necessarily a scenario where a US producer could exactly match the specification that you're bringing in from overseas, that the customer would never even know that it was sourced from a different place because the product itself is identical?
Well, you want to be very careful doing that, because in the automotive industry, let's say you make that change, but then all of a sudden they can't mold that material anymore. You're going to get a huge charge back, because they're going to say, what change did you make? Say, oh, well, we went from, jute to hemp. So now we're using hemp, and they have all these parts that they can't, scrap parts that they can't use anymore. They're going to bill you back for the material you sent them, along with all the production time they wasted and all the scrap they generated. So once you get your raw material spec'd in, unless there is a significant reason to make a change, your customer expects you to continue to use the same material.
Right. I guess what I'm asking is, could the hemp material that you're currently using be replicated here, that it is identical? Like, so the end product would be the same, just the source of the hemp was different.
Well, again, you're going to have trials done with your customer, and typically they're only going to want to do it if there's a cost savings.
Gotcha. So
I'm not saying it isn't going to happen, but they would typically, there's got to be a good reason for them to want to make a change. They don't want to rock the boat. Once you get a program up and running, they don't want to mess around with, oh, you're going to change the formula. I don't think so.
Right.
But I mean, it's not that it can't ever happen, but it's something that's frowned upon in the automotive industry.
Okay. So basically what we're saying is, like, is it because we don't have specific technical specifications for hemp that it's not like, if the hemp is this specific length and that has this graded tensile strength? I don't actually know what I'm talking about here. So like, the hemp is not hemp. Like, you would be able to tell if somebody put a pile of hemp that you got imported from overseas next to a pile of hemp that was supposed to be the same from an American producer, like, you could actually tell the difference.
I don't know. That's a good question. It just depends on, I don't really know. Now, can we substitute the North American grown hemp for European grown hemp? We could probably do that.
Okay.
But we can't change species, I guess. We can't go from jute to hemp.
Right. That makes sense. And I wonder if it would even be true about different varietals. Like, if you were to try to replace what you're importing with domestically grown, like, you would probably need them to grow the exact same varietal, perhaps, that's being grown.
Not necessarily, as long as they can meet our physical property characteristics. I mean, right now, when we're bringing stuff in from Southeast Asia, it could be grown in Western Bangladesh, it could be grown in Thailand, it could be grown in Southern Bangladesh.
Okay.
So, but it's all going to be the same jute product.
Gotcha.
So from that perspective, we don't have to buy it from that particular farm, that particular acreage. I mean, we can get it in from different locations. It just has to meet all of our inbound physical property characteristics, and also our finished part physical characteristics that the customer and we have agreed upon, as far as tensile strength, flexibility, elongation. It has to meet all those particular test requirements.
Oh, so are those specifications like company specific for you and your product, or is it important for us to create overall specifications and categories to be able to facilitate, like, you and other manufacturers to be able to start looking at US produced hemp in a in a way that it could be
Well, every
addressed?
OEM has their own performance characteristics that they want you to meet. So each one is a little different. And then, a door part is different than a package tray, which is different from a trunk trim, which is different from a seat back. So there's all these different characteristics that you have to meet. End of the day, what ends up happening is you agree upon your physical property characteristics, the material molds properly, the cover material goes on without wrinkling or any bleed through. And once that happens, then it's a go. And so the thing that's the most important then is that you consistently provide that same material so your customers don't end up having any production issues with it.
Right, makes sense.
And so that's and we have inbound specifications and inbound tests we do on our raw material. And then once we make our product, we also have physical property characteristics that our customer and us have agreed upon that our product has to meet. So every shipment that we make, every production run we produce, we run through this whole list of physical property characteristics, and then we provide a certificate of analysis to our customer indicating that we have met all the agreed upon characteristics that you require. And that goes with every shipment we make to a customer.
Wow. Have you ever had like shipments like not meet your quality standards because the fiber itself, there was, something wrong with it, or the batch didn't meet specifications?
Oh yeah, we've had issues with material before where it's been, let's say, too wet, or it could be a lot of times it's too dirty. There's too much foreign material in there because we have certain specifications as far as hurd and bark and stuff like that, and any foreign substance, any foreign material. So yeah, we've had situations where we've had to reject shipments because of that. Probably the biggest problem we see is when we bring in containers from overseas, somehow a container will get a hole in it and you'll end up with ocean water
Ooh,
in the container. And then, I mean, what ends up happening is stuff swells up and you can't even get it out of the container. So when it shows up and we open a door and it's like that, we just immediately reject it.
yeah.
And we won't even try to unload it.
Wow. So have you seen any, have you been looking at samples of bass fiber that's coming off of any of the US lines that are currently happening that are in production? And
We've
do they meet your
gotten, I
specs?
would say, she's probably 10 different samples from various potential processors that we're talking to, and some's better than others. We have yet to really find anybody that can meet our specs consistently in the volumes that we need to buy it.
Right.
They're still out there. There's a lot of people working to get there, but we haven't found it yet. But there's a
I,
handful of them that are really, really close and are starting their production now, that they can hopefully meet our spec requirements and will be generating enough volume that, that's material we can use. The two biggest things that we find with the hemp that's grown domestically is the cut length. We require between 70 and 150 millimeter length, which is basically 2 to 5 inches. And the cleanliness of the material, we can't have bark, we can't have seeds, we can't have
right.
foreign material in there, because a lot of times our customers use real thin fabric or cover material. And if you end up with, on the surface of your material, if there's a seed or a bark or something, it's going to show a defect
True, yeah.
on the surface. And obviously our customers, that's not good when that happens.
I can imagine. So do you anticipate of all of the, samples that you've seen that are domestically produced, and I'm assuming there's going to be more and more as time goes by, would any one facility be able to meet your need, or is it going to be a scenario where you're going to have to find multiple processors that are using the same equipment and the same process to be able to pool their output together in order to meet the demand?
I don't know the answer to that. We're letting everybody know that we talk to what our requirements are. And I mean, the thing about it is, we're not going to buy 60,000 pounds a week right off the bat.
Right.
It's going to be a ramp up over a number of years for us to start taking product. So it's not like from day one, somebody needs to be making that kind of volume.
Gotcha.
But we certainly need to make sure that they can consistently produce what we're going to need. And so that's what we're working with our potential suppliers in determining. It's, do they have enough farmers that are growing enough material? Can they yield enough to sell it at the price we need it, and they can still make money? Because I mean, yeah, as much as I would like to say I want to negotiate the lowest price possible, the last thing I want is our suppliers going out of business. It doesn't do any of us any good. And so, all those come into play. And I don't think we would have a problem buying hemp from multiple sources as long as they can meet our inbound physical property characteristics and our customers, physical property characteristics that they require.
Right.
So I don't think there's going to be a problem with us getting multiple sources of material. I mean, we buy multiple sources of jute out of Southeast Asia from different places. So there's no reason why we can't do it with him.
That makes good sense. I just had a question and it just went poof.
I've never had that happen to me.
No, I'm sure. It never ever happens to me either, except for right now. This is the first time ever. Yeah, so definitely. So, oh, I remember. It came back to me. So from my understanding, and I don't know if this is true or not, so I'm going to ask you, is it safe to assume that the specifications that you would need, or other people that are making kind of car parts in the non-woven, like we're talking about non-woven products, right?
Yes,
So
exactly. And
is
they're compression molded. Our customers compression mold versus injection mold.
Gotcha. So is it true that the specifications that you have in that like 2 to 5 inch length and things of that nature are kind of like the gold standard, in a sense that if a producer or decorticator can meet your specification, that likely that same material is going to be good for other scenarios, because you can always, like make it shorter, but you can't make it longer, and things like that? Or is the machinery going to have to be like tweaked, do you think, to meet each customer's specifications?
No, our specification is pretty much the same throughout all of our customers. The key to the length of the material, that's where our strength characteristics come from. So particularly in doors and door interiors, and they have to meet the side impact test requirements that the government, it tells, the automotive industry you have to meet. Well, our material, because of that long length and the light weight, gives them the strength characteristics they need to pass that test. If it was a shorter material, two things will happen. One, when we run it through our non-woven process, it's going to end up on the floor. And two, if we could process it through, you're going to lose a lot of those strength characteristics where it allows you to pass those side impact test requirements, because the fiber isn't long enough to give you that strength characteristic. So that's why it's important that you meet that. And then, on top of that, like I said, the cleanliness, I mean, you can make your own joke, but odor obviously is an issue, particularly whether it's canaf or jute or hemp. It has a distinct odor. Hemp, obviously people joke about it smelling like pot, but the thing about,
my car catches on fire, am I going to get high?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But you got the same issue with jute, in that it smells like a burn. It smells like hay. So, if it gets wet. And so and one of the test requirements that you have to meet is an odor requirement. And so whether it's whatever kind of natural fiber it is, it still has to meet that odor requirement. And it is somewhat subjective. And I think the way it works is basically they put it in high humidity or in water with high humidity, and then there's 5 people sniff it, and then they rate it from 1 to 5, and then indicate, from 1 to 5, is it an offensive odor, or does it smell good, or is it somewhere in between? And if it is offensive, what does it smell like? And so then you have to be, 3 or less to get passed. But obviously it's very, very subjective. But 5 different people do it, and I think 3 out of 5 have to pass it for it to pass. And it differs with different automotive companies, but in general, that is the way the odor test works.
That's a job that I can't say I've ever thought of before. Like, I mean, I wonder what you put on your business card. Like, I'm a sniff tester, or like.
Yeah. You know what? I think the way it works is with these labs. I think they basically, everybody that's in the lab say, all right, come here, you got to smell this. Tell me what
Your turn.
Yeah, it's your
The last
turn.
thing you want to do is smell something when somebody says, here, smell this, right?
Yeah. You think it's, a frat joke or something. Yeah.
That's interesting. When was the first time that you used hemp in any of your products?
Well, when I started working for the company in 2003, they had a program that specifically called out hemp. And so when I went to work there, we were using quite a bit of hemp that we were importing from Europe. We were probably using, I don't know, 10,000 pounds a week, I would say, in that particular program.
Oh, wow.
And, but since then, I think we've had maybe 3 or 4 different programs that have required hemp. But most of the time, our customers will say, you whatever you think is appropriate, use, but once it gets spec'd in, don't change it.
That's what it is. Yeah, that makes sense. So are you finding that your customers, is it true, like they just really don't care as long as it comes in at the price point that they need and performs the way they want it to? Or have, the ones had specifically requested hemp, is there a reason for it? Or, I mean, do they market around it, or they just know that it's a stronger natural fiber?
Well, most of them are the European OEMs, and it's what they get. They get hemp and flax in Europe. It's grown locally there. So they've done all their testing. They have all the background information on it. And when they start producing and converting material in the US, they want to do the same thing that they're doing in Europe. So that is typically why it gets called out, because that's what they've used forever in Europe, and they want to use the same material here in North America.
Makes sense. And do you anticipate that so I think it's safe to say that anything domestically produced in the hemp space is going to be a little bit more expensive because we're not at scale just yet. But in that interim amount of time, will the savings from not having to ship it from overseas sort of like compensate for that a little bit, or it's going to really need to exactly match the prices of overseas hemp?
I would say, there's going to be a lot of discussion between, okay, what's your supply chain risk management and what's the value of that compared to, buying material that is produced, domestically versus what you're importing. And I think there's going to be discussions on, and it's going to differ with OEMs, because some OEMs are going to say, we don't care where you get it from. We want the least expensive you can get. And you got other OEMs who are going to say, okay, we're willing to pay a couple of cents more per pound to mitigate our supply chain risk. And it's just going to be a mix across the board on who's going to want what.
Right.
And like I said, there are several OEMs that are specifically calling out both flax and hemp for new programs. And, they have made it a point that they want, to the extent they can, domestically grown product, because they're looking at, trying to become carbon neutral. And they're
Right.
looking at, granted, it's a natural fiber, but the fact that it ships from halfway around the world, that doesn't go well as far as, looking at your, being carbon neutral because of all the pollution generated from shipping, containers halfway around the world.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I think that's where we kind of need them to step up a little bit and be willing to pay that little bit more, at least in the short term, so we can get domestic production to scale. I would imagine that even though it doesn't have the same kind of maybe regulatory hurdles that hemp has, that flax is a little bit in the same boat. Like, I don't, do we have broad commercial scale fiber flax processing in the United States?
No, there's product grown like in Alberta, Canada, but it's used for flaxseed oil. And so it is a different, it's my understanding, and so, somebody may listen to this and know better than I do, but I think that for what that is grown for, it uses a different seed and a different purpose versus linen flax that's grown in Europe. And the risk you run into in using flax that is produces for flax oil is you don't want those seeds getting in our product because we have what's called a certain testing that has to be done to ensure, it's called fog testing. And what happens is if it gets heated or produces like some type of vapor that can get on the windshield and you can't see out. So that's a risk you run if it has oil in it.
Wow.
So that is one of the tests that you have to do is a fog test.
So basically, flax is a little bit the same as hemp in that is that you'll have kind of specific, for lack of a better word, like grain varieties that are produced for the seed versus that plants that are grown for the fiber.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
And
Yeah, because you think
I'm
the flax that's grown in Europe is linen flax, and they use it for clothing and various things like that, and cloth, where the flax oil is used for flax oil seeds. And it's
right.
the same, like you said, with hemp. You got certain hemp that's grown for CBD, which is basically bushy flowers, where we want fiber that grows 12 to 15 feet tall.
Right.
So, what we're looking for is definitely different than the CBD side.
Definitely, definitely. And like I've always been kind of super kind of side interested in flax as well, because I know historically, like particularly here in the United States, like hemp and flax were both staples. Like everybody grew hemp and flax. Like the hemp
Right.
was used more for like the sails and the Conestoga wagon covers and the feed sacks, and the flax was more typically used for linen and more delicate fabrics. Um, and my understanding is that the processing of it is kind of the same, except because flax is so delicate, like it can almost go directly into like a carding type process where like there's not really any hurd in flax. So I always wondered if hemp and flax could be processed in the same type of facility, but I'm guessing not, because flax is so much more delicate than hemp.
I
Um,
really don't know.
but I don't know.
I,
Just
I
sort of
don't know.
but yeah, I think there's some interest in seeing both hemp and flax being produced more here in the United States. But obviously, hemp just seems so much more versatile than pretty much anything else.
Yeah,
Um,
and the thing you got to be careful of with hemp and what we're finding out here in Indiana, which is where we're located, is I mean, we're competing with corn and soybeans.
yes,
So, if somebody's going to grow hemp, they're going to have to be able to a farmer is going to want to be able to make as much money and have as uh, a solid supply agreement if they're going to grow it. Because otherwise, they're going to go, why should I change from hemp from corn and soybean if I have a risk of having a field of hemp that no one's going to buy?
yeah.
So that's the other thing that we have to deal with.
No, and that's a very important point. And and particularly with some of the history of things that have happened on the cannabinoid side, I think it's made some farmers even a little bit more skittish than maybe they would have been. But we are hopeful that the upcoming passage of the Industrial Hemp Act of 2023 that will create that bifurcation between industrial hemp and cannabinoid hemp will go a long way in encouraging farmers to sort of take this on. But yeah, in that sense, it's always been kind of the chicken and the egg. It's like you can't really encourage farmers to grow it in any more than a pilot type scenario until that you're sure that they have an offtake agreement and someplace that they can sell it. I think that we're hopeful that through our education process that, we're not going to encourage any farmer to replace their corn or soy, but maybe just put hemp in with a rotation with it. And
Right.
especially if we can, demonstrate to them the soil health benefits and that they might actually get better yields of their corn and soy after a rotation of hemp, that will be able to kind of break that barrier. And certainly the removal of the background checks and the fingerprinting and the kind of, you know, treating farmers a little bit like criminals for growing hemp is going to go a long way in turning this into the true commodity crop that we need it to be in order for hemp to get to scale and be able to, successfully fulfill the demands of a manufacturer such as yourself and others across the country. So we definitely have a lot of work to do, but it really is companies like you that, you're the future of hemp. Like without people, manufacturers that want to use it and will use it when the demand's there, like, well, we would be nowhere without you. So like definitely thank you for doing what you do and being able to encourage the domestic industry to build, because it's, I know for myself, like, it's like, why aren't we further than we are now? And it's like, it's been 5 years since we passed the 2018 Farm Bill and it became legal. And then I have to kind of check myself like a little bit, because like 5 years in the is nothing in the scope of an entire industry. And we do have to, I think, take some of these baby steps and make sure that we grow responsibly. Like you said, even when you do pull the trigger and start buying domestic hemp, you're not going to buy like everything all at once. It's going to ramp up over a period of years. And that
Yeah.
seems to me to be like the responsible way to do it, to ensure that yourself and the processors and the farmers that you're going to be kind of indirectly supporting are all successful.
Yeah. Believe me, the last thing we want to risk is shutting an OEM down and having to pay $1 million an hour because their assembly line isn't running. So believe me, we're going to be, very cautious on how we do this. But on the flip side, and I'm always even afraid to say this, we feel like we're one tsunami away from our current supply base from being wiped out in Southeast Asia. So, the sooner we can bring something on domestically, believe me, it'll allow me to sleep a lot easier when that happens. And the supply chain issues that happened during COVID. I mean, we had products sitting on ships outside of Long Beach for weeks on end, and we were scrambling to get material in so we wouldn't run out and shut our customers down.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
you get it. Our polypropylene, we call one day and have it delivered the next. It'd be great to be able to do that with our natural fiber.
Yeah. And we're gonna get there. Yeah. I think and hope that, like, if anything positive came out of COVID, that it is that maybe our reliance on these global supply chains should be rethought, not just for us, but everywhere, because the amount of, you know, I think we're slowly, if we're not already there, at the point where like climate change is undeniable and it's affecting everybody's weather and the impacts, and doing more domestic manufacturing is one thing that we can do to play our part and to try to slow down emissions. Like, let's not ship stuff across the ocean unless we have to.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree.
so I'm very hopeful. So yeah, I think we covered a lot of good ground here. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you think we should?
Well, I just want to say I greatly appreciate what your organization is doing to help promote the use of hemp and the I guess the politicking or lobbying that you do in Washington to get some of these, to educate legislators to understand, what exactly it is we're trying to do. We're not a bunch of potheads out here,
Right.
trying to, use hemp to do something nefarious. So I certainly appreciate everything that your organization is doing to help that process.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that very much. And again, I do think this bill will go a long way. At least I'm hopeful, and it's going to be a long road ahead still. But again, talking to people like you like gives me courage and enthusiasm to keep going, because like we have a destination in sight. Like we know where we need to go, and we just have to take all the steps that we need to get there, one step at a time.
Yeah, and to the extent that you need my support, if you need me to speak to somebody, by all means, let me know. I'll be happy to help.
Oh, absolutely. Well, that's why we're doing this interview too, because I think it's important for other people to hear what you're doing and what you have to say. And yeah, maybe we'll drive you to DC with us sometime.
That would be fine. I would look forward to it.
Awesome. Well, Greg, thank you so much for being with us. I hope you all enjoyed this installation of In Conversation With, and thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you.